Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. This is season two after a 2-year hiatus, if that's how you pronounce it. My name is Gil, and with me is Wes. Hi, Wes.
Hello.
And as you can see, the energy remains. So we are talking today about the number one thing that is silently killing your ecom performance and something that nobody's talking about. So this is the one thing that actually got us back into this train because it's mad that whilst we're pulling our hairs behind the scenes, nobody's talking about it. So we thought with this we're gonna get started with our roadshow going into Q4. But yeah, so Wes, do you want to set the stage about what we're going to be talking about today and why it's important?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we're going to be talking about conversion tracking, how it works with cookie consent, banners, cookie
Or don't,
consent solutions, or
or, or,
don't,
or, or it doesn't.
or it doesn't. So you get a lot of people talking about conversion tracking, and weirdly enough, we're a technology company and a data science company and a sea of agencies, and every time we talk to a brand that's got an agency running paid media, we ask them how they're handling their conversion tracking, and they're like, "Oh, they don't. It's just like a button that's switched on in Shopify, like one click, and it's turned on like you're tracking, it's like an app, and you just kind of like turn it on." So if you're spending tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands pounds sending traffic through
Or
your
however
website,
much, really. I mean, because at the end of the day, it will impact you regardless of
it
how much
will,
you're
it will. But if you're sending
spending.
serious, decent money on through ad platforms that require tracking as their for their like I don't know, that's their blood, that's their food, that's the thing that they need to thrive and survive. And if it's not being done properly, and you've just clicked a switch in Shopify or WordPress or installed a really simple app, vanilla app, 100% your conversion tracking is broken. And if your conversion tracking is broken in some way, you can have the best button pushers in the world in the ad accounts and the best creatives and the best strategists and a great website and a great product. If the majority of your or a significant portion of your revenue is being derived from digital and from paid media, then nothing else matters. And we're seeing 100% of all brands that we audit or that we work with, the conversion tracking breaks a lot. And it gets broken by apps being installed on the website, Shopify updates, for example, or WordPress updates, site updates generally, UI, UX updates, backend, cookie consent management, all sorts of stuff. Just a random app that you might put on the store that does like a bundle, or it does a one-click um, post-purchase thing. Those things are killer, or subscription stuff. It injects code into the website. It can remove events, double fire events, remove the value on events, remove the product information on these events. And all this information is just starving the ad platforms of the very air that it needs, that it breathes to do its work. So it just
Maybe before we continue there, was let's take a step back, and maybe it would be worth explaining why is important these signals going into the channels,
well, I'll explain what it
and
is.
also
Yeah.
why it should be accurate, like why double firing, why not getting the right information, why passing product information is important. I think that that
So
maybe
yeah,
adding a
I'll
little bit of
explain
context about
like
this.
high level what it is, why it's important. So high level conversion tracking, say, and I'll use say Meta and Google as two examples for paid media. So conversion tracking does three things. It tracks key events on the website. So if somebody lands on a page or views a product, adds something to cart, starts the checkout process, and then purchases, it will trigger events on various buttons or pages on your website. And then it will tell the ads, yeah, this person who clicked on an ad has triggered this event. And that will give the ad platforms some view of the intent of the customer and how valuable that customer is. So if you are optimizing campaigns for purchase, people are doing events along the way to purchase. And if you're sending those events in, and it's optimizing the campaign for purchase or add to cart. It's going to use those events, and then it's going to use the other data that's sent on those events. So it uses customer information, so it matches customers to events, and it's say by email addresses, um, Facebook Click ID stuff or Google Click ID, all sorts of stuff, name, address. If you've checked out, obviously you're giving the platforms like much more information. But if you're logged in to Facebook or you're logged into Google, it can also get additional information. So it sends event information for those key events I've mentioned. It sends customer information, profiling information, which then says, yeah, we recognize that person. It's Gil. Like, it matches his full name, it matches his DOB, it matches his address. That's him. Yeah, and we found his profile on our platform, say for Meta, and it can attribute against you, within a certain period, whether that's 7-day click is maximum on Meta now, but it can be much longer on Google. And then the final bit of information it sends is product information. So what products you're interacting with, what have you viewed, what have you added to cart, the size, the make, the model, the color, the value, the currency. And so all this information can then be used, particularly the product information, for retargeting. So you can retarget people who've added, say they add 6 things to basket, 6 tops, all the same size, but all different colors and slightly different styles. It can then store that information, retarget them. Say everybody within 30 days it's added to basket. You can run campaigns that retarget people with the stuff that they've added to basket. If you're not sending that product information and the customer information, the event information properly, then it can't do that. It's going to retarget less people, and retargeting campaigns are obviously highly valuable. But it can also inform prospecting campaigns. So it's, the platforms can see, oh, these people that look like this age, this gender, they're interested in this stuff. They visit these other websites. They're generally interested in these kind of market segments, these interests and these behaviors. They're going to the website and they're generally interacting with these products. So if you run, say, a dabber campaign on Meta, it will use that information to then target people of a similar profile with similar products, because it's got that information. It matches the event, the product, and the customer information, and it can then help with targeting. So it's not just about retargeting; it's also about prospecting. It's doing all that lookalike stuff behind the scenes. So if you're starving the platforms of that information, which nearly all brands in the world will be doing right now, there's no such thing as this stuff works 100%. It doesn't. Fluctuates day to day, and you're trying to keep it as stable as possible. But you've got so much stuff that affects it, and a big one for us that we're finding right now, which is an absolute killer, and we don't see any solution working properly, especially in terms of Shopify, because there's checkout extensibility stuff and a lot of the updates going on there, is the cookie consent stuff. So you've got a cookie banner on your website. It's a really kind of grey area, what information you can and can't send. You're meant to have the cookie banner set up in a certain way to make it compliant, but then we see the actual solutions that are being used. I'm not going to name any names, but some big providers are not actually compliant themselves, and there's nothing we or anybody else can do about it, apart from the actual people who own the technology, the companies that own these cookie provider solutions. They're just not working properly, and they're either boosting sessions on the website when you've got a fully interruptive cookie banner, and people should be opting out. If you have a deny all button on the front page of your cookie banner, the opt-out rate can be 20, 30%. And then we're seeing sessions being boosted inside Shopify when we've added some of these solutions on. We're seeing add to carts being hammered and then being less than the actual checkouts reach. So there's some weird stuff going on inside Shopify, and it's affecting the conversion rate. Obviously, if it's boosting sessions, but you're not getting any more converted sessions, then your conversion rate looks like it's dropped. And it just gives me zero confidence into what data is actually being sent into the ad platform. So we've got a specific department, a data services department, and our own technology set up to do browser and server side tracking and work with all the compliance stuff from all these cookie consent providers, and that they're not actually working properly. So we're constantly seeing issues and fluctuations in the ad accounts that can't be ascribed to changes we've made in the ad accounts, or really auction stuff, and it's coming from the website and from these solutions, and it is an absolute performance killer. So making something compliant, and then
And it's worth mentioning, right? I mean, especially over the last few weeks, and I don't know why. It seems like something changed in the air. It's feels like Lord of the Rings, or like there is something in the water, in the air, everywhere that is suddenly like just screw up all of this stuff, and suddenly we're building up to a perfect storm scenario. Obviously, we have checkout extensibility, which is
on
divided into two
Shopify, yeah.
parts. Massive risk and change.
You were going
Suddenly
to say
that
shit show
affects.
then. It is, yeah. It's a mega shit show.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it, like PG-13, but it is, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it is, right? And um, at the moment, as we speak, our team is testing over 10 different cookie consent providers. Um, of all shape and sizes. Some are native to Shopify. Even Shopify's native cookie consent providing, like the one that ships with Shopify, it's not even compliant. It doesn't allow you to connect to your consent mode on Google. Doesn't give you the proper assurances. Something to bear in mind, because I mean, if you're not able to connect to your your with consent mode on Google, suddenly you're not able to retarget people
Yeah, just
on
to
on
expand
on
on
your
that,
Google platforms.
Google released Google Consent Mode V2 back in April. I think April the 6th or something like that. You had to add some code and calibrate your cookie consent provider to be compliant with this new Google Consent Mode V2, which is basically a way of it hashing some personally identifiable information, so it can send more data to the ad platforms in a more compliant, more privacy centric way. Um, and all the brands and all the companies that have not done that by April the 6th, if you've not done it, you won't be doing any personalized retargeting on Google. So when I was talking about people adding stuff, particular products to basket, or viewing particular products and then retargeting them with those exact products, you cannot do that right across any Google surface if you have not done this Google Consent Mode V2 thing and done it in a way in which it's compliant. And so if your stuff isn't compliant and you're just triggering, Google tags and meta tag and all that kind of stuff without anybody doing anything with a cookie banner, then you're definitely not doing it. But even if you think you've got consent mode V2 set up, it doesn't work properly. Even on Google Ads app that you install on Shopify, it doesn't work properly. And that stuff just doesn't work. It's just broken all over the place. They don't work with a bunch of apps, and so we've taken all that stuff out of Shopify. It's too vanilla. It breaks too much. It's not the core, reason for existing for these companies. And to leave that to just like a one plug and play set and forget app from Google, or a one button in Shopify, you're just risking all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I would rather, like Shopify not support it, like, because I mean, I feel like supporting it halfway, and our team has been in contact, with Shopify. It's been in contact with, and Shopify is like, oh, it's not our fault, it's Google's fault. We go into Google, it's like, well, it's actually Shopify's implementation, it's not our fault. Like this thing about passing the ball, like the hot potato in between, like just don't, like just rather don't support something if you're not going to support it full through. And then at least let other companies, right, like actually recommend other companies to actually go and do it. This is why we had to build our own, because there was nothing out there that would be as bulletproof as we actually needed. one-click solutions don't work because these things fails. And then even if you do it today and it's working today, nothing is stopping you from it breaking tomorrow. And oftentimes, we have a situation at the moment with a handful of our brands where the consent mode stopped working with the minute checkout extensibility was turned on. And now we need to go and figure out. Now, the problem with a lot of these changes, especially when, everything was working until it didn't, is that no matter how small the fix is, it will definitely affect your performance. Because any variation in the consistency of the signal going into your channels is going to affect it.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
anything
right
that's
now, it's
affecting
almost like,
anything that's affecting the conversion rate. So if you're optimizing for purchase in your campaigns,
the conversion rate as seen by the channels, right? Because ultimately, at the
the
end of
ad
the day,
channels,
people go in and
So
convert, but it's how they see it, right? How they perceive it, how it's communicated back to them.
So if the ad platform, so I use an analogy of this line of ants thing. So if you've ever seen a line of ants and all the ants are just going in this little line and they're all following each other, this little chemical trail going from A to B. If you blow on that line of ants, the ants scatter and go in all different directions because they've suddenly lost that trail that they're following. And then eventually they kind of get back on it. And then, the chemical trail kind of locks back into place, but that is what happens to the money and the ads. So you can think of A to B. So you can think of the ad at the start, or the money that you're putting in at the start, and then your target persona is at B, and then you're firing these ads from A to B, and then you get enough purchase data, and then the platforms know, yeah, okay, like this is our audience, this demographic, they're interested in these behaviors and interests, and they visit these other websites, etc., etc. And he knows if you disturb that signal, and all of a sudden the signal drops, the conversion rate drops, all of a sudden the ad platforms think, oh, that audience is no longer working. I'm going to go and look for another audience, and it just scatters. And then your CPMs, your cost per impression goes up, your click-through rate goes down, cost per click's gone up. These people are getting to your website and they're not actually the right person. So your cost per view content and cost per add to cart and checkout and cost per purchase all go up right along the funnel. And then if that happens and you're getting less sessions to your website, and then you're getting less people adding to cart, you're sending less abandoned cart emails, and your retargeting doesn't work quite as well on all the paid media channels that you're running because they're all interlinked. And then you're sending less abandoned cart emails out, so your email revenues drop in, and it's all got this. It's like a death spiral. And what we've seen, and this is outside of, we thought it had something to do with maybe conversion tracking and for ads, and then cookie consent stuff, some stuff in Shopify where all of a sudden add to carts are tanking, and the ratio between add to carts and begin checkout gets out of whack. Normally, you have more add to carts than checkout on a normal site that's set up in a relatively normal way, where you've got add stuff to cart and then you go into the cart and you begin the checkout process. And we're seeing a complete inversion of that. And on the site, it doesn't look like anything's wrong. So the brand are like, well, nothing's wrong on the site. But what that's doing, again, it's triggering less add to carts. That is inside, that's first party tracking within Shopify, and it's triggering less abandoned cart emails. So we're getting less traffic in from that source. It's triggering less cart. It's triggering less carts on for the actual ad platform. So retargeting's not quite working as well. And then it's just this ecosystem that just starts to degrade. And once it starts to degrade right across the funnel, all the channels are affected by it, and there's a kind of a downward spiral. And that stuff takes quite a while to get back on track. That whole chemical trail with that takes a while to get back on track, and then become stable. What we want is stable signal, stable campaigns, not too many changes. Unless you're spending a ton of money
abundant data.
to refresh your agent, you just want like abundant, compliant data with the event, the product information, the customer information, and that stuff is being cyber attacked from every angle, all day, every day. And good luck to the brands who've got stability within the platforms and everything's stable. Those brands are probably, would you have a website? Say you're spending 50 grand a month, 100 grand a month. Would you have a website that didn't have a developer on hand to be maintaining that website and on call in case it breaks on a retainer? You wouldn't, would you? No sensible brand would. That's your insurance policy against like loss of revenue that you pay your people with. And it's the same for conversion tracking. If you've not got anybody looking after it and maintaining it on a retainer, and look, especially for the brands that are spending tens and hundreds of £1,000s, you need your head examining, because that stuff could just kill your business from one
But
month.
it's interesting, right? That comment was because, and we're seeing it out there, right? And it is becoming more of an educational piece that we do, especially when we're talking with newer, with prospective brands. It doesn't get talked that much. It doesn't get communicated that much, the importance of this.
Well, it's a black box, though, isn't it? It's a
Oftentimes
black
it
box.
gets it gets overseen. It's
It's a black box to us. So
it,
imagine what it's like for these brands who aren't software engineers and tagging specialists and analytics specialists. It's even more. It's a black box within a black hole. Do you know what I mean? It's so opaque. It's almost invisible. It's so difficult to see. All we see is the effect of what's happening, the breakages within the performance campaigns. So, like I said, along the funnel, the costs per impression, click, page view, view content, add to cart, checkout, purchase, and looking at the cost of these all the time and seeing fluctuations within the ad accounts, within Shopify, whatever site platform you use, and making sure within GA and looking at all this data and seeing like there's something not right. Something's not right. We've not touched the ad campaign. There's something not right. And then, we start looking, or we've got some technology called Watcher that watches all these events and signals. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah, we've just spotted like an anomaly in the add to cart event. It's dropped by 75% and it stayed down there for a week. Luckily we can see this stuff really quickly. We can see it like within minutes when this stuff breaks. But up until fairly recently, a couple of years ago, we couldn't see this. We could just see the effect, and then it was a case of, right, something's wrong. We need to go and identify this problem. And then when we've identified the area it exists and we need to diagnose it, then we need to come up with a solution. And to be honest, I speak to one of our team today, a lad called James, and I was saying our job is not actually just, because we're great at what we do. We know how to launch and run and optimize campaigns and all the best practice stuff for e-com brands. It's like, it's not rocket science how to set up these ad campaigns and run them. But our job is to minimize the time spent with stuff broken. Everything, loads of stuff breaks all the time. And the quicker we can identify it and the quick or avoid it, the more we can avoid this stuff by educating the clients, having an open communication line with the clients. If they're going to update on anything on their website, then the better the campaigns will be. It's not like, oh, we're searching for this special solution to make the ads campaigns like, you get all these Facebook bullshit gurus out there going like, I structure the campaigns like this, that, and the other with all these rules. That's just garbage. Do you know what I mean? It's just garbage. This stuff's pretty straightforward, and it's about minimizing the breakages in the signal that's coming from the website to the ad campaigns. That stuff is what's really going to set brands like the successful ones from the not successful ones apart in this day and age.
And this is becoming even more important in this age of AI, in many ways, because you have your Advantage Plus campaigns and your PMax campaigns, and it's like, oh, now Facebook is doing all the job for me, if it has the data, if it has the right signals. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how smart these engines and robots and everything becomes. If you're not passing the data, there's nothing to optimize against. Or worst, if you pass the wrong type of data, then it's going to be optimizing against you.
Or if you go, oh, yeah, I've had a slap on the wrist, so someone's told me my cookie consent isn't compliant, I'm not GDPR compliant. I'm just going to install a cookie banner and I'm just going to make it compliant so that all of a sudden it doesn't fire any tags, pics, or anything, send any data without somebody either accepting or deny. And you have this fully interruptive cookie banner. Be prepared for a shitstorm once you do that. That's like opt out, less data, campaigns are getting less data, less conversion data. Like it's going to disrupt the performance of your campaigns. That's going to be the new normal. It's getting more and more stringent now. And how many times do you go on a website and you've got to do this thing with the cookies? Every website you go on, like it's a tyranny. And there's got to be
And not only
some.
that, right? I mean, it's like even, there's certain implementations, right? Like Apple's implementation. Um, Apple is going to destroy your cookies after 7 days, no matter what, whether even you accept it or not. So it means that even if you accept it today, so in my case, I like my ads to be personalized to my own interest. So I always accept them. I mean, I understand other people who don't, and, it's a personal preference, but um, I hated having to come into a website and having to accept it every single time just because Apple thought, oh, you know what, I'm protecting you. No, you're not. I mean, you're fighting the fight against the channels because you cannot get revenue out of that. But um, it is against the users, like experience and everything. But and this is something that has been a very important topic internally for us. Like Wes says, this is the new normal. It doesn't matter how you want to delay, how much you want. This is the new normal. And the soonest you bite the bullet, the soonest you accept that this is reality, then the better. Now, what you need to do is plan for it. You need to prepare for it. You need to make sure that you understand what the baseline is, what the impact is going to be. Something that we measure is opt-out rates, so that we can also understand what does that opt-out rate actually means in the data, because suddenly opt-out rate is going to make all of your organic look much better when in reality it's not, right? And then you're going to have your CFO saying, oh, shut down the app, the pay media, because it's not working. Just look at all that organic stuff coming in.
Yeah,
And that's also not right.
anybody using GA really to look at traffic sources, yeah, you can use it to identify a problem and see what's changed, and you can use it for some base rate stuff, but it's not going to give you in any way an accurate picture of what traffic is coming from where. Simple, just anybody listening to this, go and look at direct. What direct is. Direct, most people are like, oh yeah, that's people like typing in your like name of your website into the browser. No, it's not. You're getting 30% of all your revenue like coming from people directly. I don't think so. It's unknown. Most of it is just unknown, unassigned traffic. So you can get unassigned in GA and you can get direct. Still within that direct, there'll be a whole bunch of unknown. The referrer information cannot be passed. For example, if you're on Instagram and you open somebody's website, it doesn't go to like Chrome or Safari and open their website a lot of the time. It just opens it from within Instagram or Facebook Meta's browser and within the mobile app. And that's a lot of the time that information just cannot be sent to GA. So that referrer information doesn't get passed. So it just goes into direct or something or unassigned. And UTMs don't solve it. UTMs get stripped out for hundreds of different reasons. So this tracking stuff, yeah, we've hardly spoken about GA4, and I don't even think it's worth talking about it that much from this point of view. But yeah, if you're not looking at your tracking, monitoring your tracking every day, and you've got issues with your ad campaigns and you just cannot figure it out, chances are it's the tracking.
So let's look at recommendations, right? I mean, it is it is our comeback tour, right? I mean, it's our comeback episode. It is a gloom and doom scenario, and not because we want it, because we actually, when we started planning this, we actually wanted this to be, quite a cheerful, like Yoli comeback, but it ain't, right? And the worst part is, like Q4 just around the corner. Holiday season is just around the corner. These probably couldn't have come up at a worse time. Granted, and this is the bit where it's all of our teams pulling our hairs. It's not consistent, right? Like every single store is different. Every single store, even if you're on Shopify Plus, because we have a handful of of Shopify Plus brands in our roster, and doesn't matter, like where you are. I mean, you're gonna be impacted in slightly different ways. The most important thing is keeping yourself monitored. But the reality is something is happening. Like something is not right now. Suddenly, it is being better, everywhere you want it. Best way is to monitor it. In our case, like Wes said, we have Watcher that is constantly running tests every single day. To some brands, it runs every single hour because they're spending a lot of money, which means that we want to capture that as soon as possible. Is making sure that all events are firing. It's making sure that all the data is passing. Then there is the post, data anomaly detection, right? Is the are my conversions down? Are the information, tracking coming
Is the
down?
ratio between each conversion event stable? Has add to cart fluctuated wildly in its ratio with how many people then go on to begin the checkout process? So there are anomalies within those conversion rates between each event, from page view to view content to add to cart to checkout, checkout to purchase. So keeping an eye on that can help you detect the day and then you might be able to, right, okay, it's within this part of the journey, like there's an issue here, and then it will give you a clue where to look to fix it. But in terms of solutions for this, I mean, first off, you can upgrade and there's plenty of providers, including us, but you can upgrade your conversion tracking from standard one-click implementations. If you're using the Google app in Shopify, for example, for Google Ads tracking, that's a piece of shit. If you sorry Google, but that's the truth of the matter. It just breaks like all the time,
or
and it
double
doesn't.
count event.
A double count, so that anything can be a break. Double counting events, not counting events, not sending product information, customer information, not tracking a purchase on a post purchase solution, like a one click upsell thing after you've purchased. That can be an issue. But have a look at how your conversion tracking is working, how it's set up, what solution you're actually using for it. Have a look at Events Manager in Meta. That'll give you a clue. There's all sorts of like best practice and warning stuff in there. There's settings on there on how to do advanced matching and all that kind of stuff. Have a look, just deep dive into it. Have a look how it's all set up. If there's anything that looks weird or there's warning signs and diagnostic issues, then dig into those. But you use a proper robust solution that does server side, does browser, server, and it does this stuff. There's some server side that's not actually server side. So like Google Tag Manager for like there's some weird server side stuff there that's not really server side, and it relies on browser events to send the server side information, which means it's not server side, right? Server side should fill a gap when the browser stuff can't fire. But have a look how it's set up and then figure out what solutions out there to make this better so that you send in more stable data so it doesn't break as much. If a lot of the solutions out there break really easy. They're on like DOM elements on your website. Like have a data layer where everything's triggered from that instead. That can make it more stable. It's more secure as well. You've got more control over the data you do and don't send. And then have a look
Or
at
if you depend on customer events in Shopify, test them. Like we have found very weird anomalies even on with Shopify native like frameworks. Again, is it Shopify's fault? Maybe not. It might be an app that is hijacking some of the signal and is not making things firing, right? Especially post-purchase experience or upsell, things, cross-sell. You need to be on it. Really need to be testing this.
And then, your conversion tracking, yeah, you can upgrade it all, but it's going to be fundamentally affected by your cookie consent solution and how how compliant you want to be. Most brands out there are just risking it, and they're probably risking it unknowingly because it's not, it's not like straightforward black and white subject. And then even if you go, right, yeah, okay, I'm going to set it up and I'm going to have this big banner that's fully interruptive and it says on one banner accept or deny, even then you're at the mercy of whether that technology actually works, whether it actually blocks the tracking or not. And there's not much you can do about that unless you're a software engineer and a specialist in this area, and that stuff just doesn't work that well. So the industry is being forced to upgrade to these solutions that actually don't even work that well, and they're sending either erroneous data, not sending the right data, sending too much data, not being compliant. So even if you have it set up and you've installed the app and you've done everything it said with the deny, you could still be non-compliant, and you could still risk getting a slap on the wrist or whatever, a fine. So like, I don't know, what's the incentive for people to upgrade to this stuff? So somebody who's got a cookie banner.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing with this is that, a lot of this stuff relies on other people's technologies that gets updated without your own control. And I think this is, like we've seen it this morning. We woke up, something that has been working all right suddenly stopped working. And now, granted, we have this technology that monitors it, but like sometimes we were discussing this earlier today. It's the curse of knowing. Like sometimes, when you don't know, right? I mean, but when you know, and especially when you've done nothing, and it's somebody else who've done it, who are supposed to be the compliant partner
Yeah.
in
So somebody
in the
this
mix.
morning, it's so that we've got our tracking set up with a cookie consent solution that's been installed by the client, and everything on the surface looks compliant. Happy days. And we just saw this morning it's not compliant. It's firing without anybody doing anything to this banner, and it's not our fault. We can't fix it. It's because the Shopify extensibility upgrade has ruined this, and then the actual solution we're using, in speaking to the provider, said, yeah, it's a known issue, actually. Like, when is it going to be rolled out? Yeah, we don't know. So we now have got to say something to the client to say, look, we've noticed this, not compliant. And what that's going to do is cause panic in our team, their team. Then we're going to look for a solution. We're probably going to replace it. And then it's probably going to then hammer the data that's being sent. It will destabilize the data and the signal that's being sent to the campaigns, which are flying and the company's doing really well. And the majority of their revenue is derived from paid media. So it's a huge risk to do anything about it. And honestly, if I could turn back time, I wish I didn't know. And I wish nobody had pointed it out, because then I wouldn't be responsible for having to say something to the client to say, this solution you're using, nothing to do with us. You're paying for this solution. It's not working. And if you want to be compliant, you're going to have to do something about it. And they say to us, well, what should we do? And I'm like, well, I don't want to make a recommendation because I don't want to be liable. Like, it's like, I'm Paul. It's between y'all. Like, you just figure it out. Do you know what I mean? If I'm being selfish, like, don't do anything. It's going to ruin the campaigns. We're responsible for the campaigns, but that's, the brands are going to want to be compliant, and they're like, what's the risk?
Yeah,
What happens if we get found out? I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, and especially because you're compliant all the way except one step out of change, and that change, like yeah. So at the moment, right, and we're gonna try to be to have this ready for next week. We're gonna try to be consistent this time around. I'm trying to make it simple. Actually, we're aim to keep it short and sweet. But next week we'll have a probably at least the findings of this research that we're doing. We're analyzing 10 different cookie providers, big and small, native, non-native, just to see what's out there, and then we'll report back. Trying to do this, I mean, as independent as you can, because again, right, I mean, our skin is in the game, in many ways. Our responsibility is that with brands, and the more the more you realize how much you're in control and how much you're not.
We've
The
got a
most
gun
important
to
thing
our
is knowing.
we've got a gun to our head
Yeah,
every day, like, about performance, like how are the ads performing, how are the channels performing. So anything that can affect the performance of the campaigns is fair game for us to have an opinion or to try to control cookie consent banners, your website, email, other channels you're running, additional marketing activity. It all has an effect on what we're doing
Even the
running
stability of the
performance
apps that
marketing.
you install,
Yeah.
like especially
Where does
bundle
it
apps.
end? Where does our remit end? So we try and get involved in, like, as long as we know what's going on and we can identify a problem, or we can provide advice like, before we install that or do that, like, let's make sure X, Y, and Z. But, just as a bit of advice to end it on a positive note, if you're thinking about, this stuff and this is ringing a bell, have a rollout plan, because, we've forgotten to talk about product feeds, but your conversion tracking is all connected to your product feeds as well. So if you change the conversion tracking solutions, you can just break all your product feeds as well really easily. And if you're getting loads of performance and you're delivering a lot of good stuff from PMAX campaigns and Advantage Plus and catalog ads campaigns, all that stuff can be disturbed by cookie consent stuff, by conversion tracking. So have a rollout plan, like how to do it in stages, so you can identify, we changed this one thing and this has happened, right? Okay, now we'll go and change this, and then when to do it. You don't just do it directly after a sale, because you'll be like, oh, we changed this today and conversion rates dropped in sessions, and it's like, yeah, well, you've just come off a 30% sale that you've been running for a week. So you need to isolate it and do it at the right moment, where there's not lots of other dynamic changes around it, which is difficult in ecom because it's a really dynamic space, and then obviously
Yeah,
get it done
maybe
before
that's
goes too far.
that's a very good point. Was let's end it on this. What is our recommendation? Conversion tracking fix first, cookie consent second, the other way around. Why control it? Why is important, but also most importantly, everybody needs to be on the same page. Like what order do you recommend?
Me? Oh, right, you're asking a question. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I'm asking a question.
do the cookie consent stuff first, because once you've done the conversion tracking stuff, you don't want anything to disturb it after that. So if you've got campaigns to launch, you've got anything, do the cookie consent stuff. Because if you did the conversion tracking and went, oh, we're doing all this good stuff, we've got browser and server side and enhanced conversions for Google, and we're doing offline conversions, and we're sending in all this data, and with Google Consent Mode V2, blah blah blah, all this great data, and then you install a cookie consent solution, and previously you didn't really have one that wasn't compliant, so you were just collecting 100% of the data. All of a sudden, all that good signal that you've just had for however long is now going to see a reduction of like 20-30%, because people are now, you're giving them the ability to opt out, and that will disturb the performance of the campaigns. So once you do everything first and then do the conversion tracking stuff last, then launch the campaigns, and then after that, that should be the last thing you want to minimize the disturbance to the signal. So get the cookie consent stuff first, then conversion tracking stuff, product feed stuff, then launch your campaigns, and then try and leave it as much as possible.
And then pray to the gods that nothing is going to happen. But look, team, this is the life we live. In many ways, this is the life you ought to be living in many ways, and we wish you wasn't. And if you're not there, then most probably something is broken. And if you're not, then like kudos to you. But yeah, we wanted to start this with some value driven stuff. Like the second season, we're gonna have brands guests as we've done in the first season, but we're also gonna be speaking about what we see, because I'm sure that if we're seeing it, others are seeing it, and they probably are gonna take advantage of our gray hairs that we're pulling ourselves into making this happen, as well as the solutions that we're putting in. Luckily, we have a lot of very dedicated, curious people in our team who take this very, very seriously and almost personally to try to find a solution to this thing. So um, if you're out there, if you have solutions, we'd love to hear about them on the comments, wherever it is that you're consuming this content. Yeah, welcome to season 2 of the Leaf Collectivo. My name is Gil. With me is Wes. Producing this episode is Kirsten. And yeah, from the Northeast, we just say hi. Bye. Have a great day.
Cheers.